Sanjay, thank you so much for taking time to jump on the podcast. You came heavily referred to me by a mutual contact, Coach Cal. He said, you need to talk to Sanjay. You need to hear his story. And I mean, just reading up on what you've been through and everything like that has been incredible. But before we get there, I want to go back just a little bit and let's talk about kind of your journey into marathoning, running, cycling, everything. I want to know, who you were as kind of like a mid-teen into your young 20, like early 20s. Like, tell me how your training went and how you got into that sport.
Yeah, well, I mean, first and foremost, I want to say thank you for reaching out to me and wanting to bring me on the podcast. Yeah, very much appreciate it. So first off, thank you, and I've definitely listened to a few of them in the past, and I think you're doing some awesome things. So yeah, so going back, my background, I grew up in a house where my dad was an avid cyclist. He tried to get me into biking, and I'd always have a bike. He'd put me on the back of a tandem, which he got, and we would go for 3-day trips. And we just had this kind of love for cycling ever since I was very little. And I always would see my dad running, biking. He was very active that way. As I grew up, I always played sports, but I kind of had this separation from it for a little bit. Went to university. I played lacrosse at university. And, I wasn't kind of strictly biking and running anymore. I always just did it recreationally. I got into lifting weights a little bit more, kind of more focused with my job, and then ended up breaking my knee while I was working, and then I just kind of said, all right, I want to be more about mobility and get back into kind of the basics of running and biking and kind of where my passion and love was at a time. So I said, let's do a triathlon. That's kind of what I wanted to do. And I signed up for Ironman Canada, which was my first triathlon. I figured I didn't know enough about it, so I said, let's jump into it, which is where I initially met Cal Zariski. And I phoned him up and said, listen, I'm willing to work, but I've never done a triathlon before, and this is what I signed up for. And I could hear his a little bit of apprehension on the phone when he was probably thinking this guy is absolutely mad. But yeah, he was willing to jump into it with me, and we had a pretty good time with it.
That is so incredible. Like, I mean, right now you're what, 37, 38. Like, when was that first Ironman? And, looking back, do you regret it?
No, gosh, no. It was 2016 that I signed up for it. I was prior to that, I was running and biking. As I was getting back into the sport, I was signing up for more recreational events, kind of around Canmore, and just trying different stuff out and kind of rebuilding that passion and kind of feel for the sport. But yeah, in 2016, I said, let's do it. It was the same time my son was being born, which was probably the worst timing in the world, but in retrospect. But I had the idea in my head, and I wanted to go after it. So, and the unfortunate part is I started my training for triathlon in January, and of course the event was in the summer. So it was a drinking from a fire hose for a few months to say the least. But yeah, definitely no regrets. It was definitely the start of something.
That's incredible. So talk about it. Like, how did you place? How did you finish? Like, tell me about the experience itself.
Yeah, you know what? I didn't know what to experience. For the event, you do lots of training in individual, your swim training, your bike training, your run training, or maybe put a few of them together in a longer day, but obviously with breaks and kind of separated. Yeah, when I went into it, I had a time in my head, which I think was very ambitious, but in the same breath, I thought, hey, I don't know any better, so let's have some fun. And you know what? It worked out pretty good. I think, including the pro category. So I finished 60th overall. Yeah, a time of 10:20 on the nose. I just and of course the time, it fluctuates. You never know your day on long distance sport events. But I just remember the swim. I thought if I get out of the swim, we're in good standing. The swim was one of the scariest things I've ever experienced. I got on the bike, and I remember the bike was so long, and I laughed at the volunteer after the bike, and I just said, I have to run a marathon now, right? And he just started laughing at me, and he's like, you do. And I was like, this is crazy, absolutely insane. But you know what? In an event like that, you learn so much about yourself. Almost by the minute, every hour, the emotional changes, everything. And you sit back at regardless of your time, regardless of whether you're a pro and amateur, you sit back and you go, man, that I just experienced something I could never experience anywhere else. It was such a unique event, such a positive event with people. Everyone cheering you on, strangers you never met before that you're learning about over the course of this 10 to 17 hour day. It was incredible. And for me personally, I felt that it was, I found something really unique where it just really catered to the person I am and kind of the sport that I wanted to pursue. Not so much into Ironman, but more into that long distance. It kind of ignited and sparked something in me that I was like, I really like this, where you have to really kind of have those multiple ebbs and flows of digging deep, finding yourself, and then coming out of that grittiness, right?
So I'm like, you said your time was 10:20. Like, I'm curious, when do you kind of zone out where it's like, I don't feel my body anymore? Like, is it during the swim? Is it during the bike? Are you like just kind of going with the flow? Like, tell me about that. Like, because I've never done an Ironman myself, but I assume that there's got to be some sort of, mental connection going on, or maybe that you just kind of, it's like an out of body experience.
Well, you know what? That's one thing I'll definitely give to a lot of credit to Cal, is that we spent so much time working together and really found those sweet spots and those pockets to kind of keep that sustained effort within that your wheelhouse really of where your training's at, to make sure that day is a successful day. So to say, I'd say kind of near the end of the run, you're definitely the run's it's a hard one on the head, because you've already put in a substantial amount of time, and now you're it's almost like you can see, and especially on a looped course, you can see the finish multiple times, but you're not there. And so that, it's harder on the head, but certainly certainly felt really prepared going into it.
So take me through the timeline of events then. So we had the first Ironman, and then I guess tell me how things progressed. And you mentioned coming up to the event. So like, did you continue going through races, and how did you first get that diagnosis?
Yeah, so you know what, I finished Ironman. Really felt great. Obviously feeling in really good shape. I from there I actually went to Xterra, the Xterra qualifiers, which is off-road triathlon. And I thought, hey, let's give this a shot while kind of you're maintaining that fitness level for multisport. Went to the qualifier, and I got very fortunate, and I punched my ticket to Worlds. So yeah, over the moon with that. So my third ever triathlon was flying to Maui and doing Worlds there, which was just such a cool experience. So much to be grateful for. And so my wife and my newborn son, we flew to Hawaii, first time ever landing in Maui. And I'm sure it wasn't the trip that they planned, because of course stress levels were high and trying to get training in and acclimatized. And but yeah, I got there. Terrible weather. It absolutely poured, which is fine. I mean, that's what makes off-road triathlon so much fun. I took an awesome crash on the bike that kind of put me out of contention. But again, that's just the sport. So lots to take away from it. I came back from the US then. Took a little bit of time, just to some downtime for myself, and then obviously with the family life and kind of new family life, I decided I'd still like to pursue racing, but I just needed to kind of focus a little more on one sport as opposed to three. Running always was something I just loved doing, so I figured I'd focus on running. But I didn't want to kind of go the half marathon route. I wanted to try and tackle the ultra marathons, as I felt like that fitness could kind of continue on. So I got a kind of a nice partnership with Planet Foods and also with Cal, where I went to Golden to do the 3-day Golden Ultra, and then came back home and did the Grizzly Ultra about I think it was 12 days later. And both of those races, they were amazing. There was my kind of off-road ultras, absolutely unreal. Really found a good love for that kind of 50K distance. Again, after those 2 races, I took a little bit of a break, and then I said, all right, I'm not racing anymore. We'll take some time for the family. And one of my good friends, who's a professional runner, Jacob Pusey, he's from the US, but he races in Canada. And of course, he phoned me up and said, 50K nationals are going to be held in Calgary this year. Put your application in as an elite and come race for the title. And of course, my wheels were spinning. I never had the chance to race as an elite yet. My application got accepted, so I was, this was something that I thought, all right, this is going to be really neat. Toe the line with some good guys, and especially in my own backyard, and basically just see what we can do. So got to the start line. Myself and Jacob battled it out, and Jacob probably wouldn't admit it very often, but he absolutely put the wheels to me that day. So, but yeah, it was great. I finished second, top Canadian, and so at that point where my head was at, I knew we had work to do, but in the same breath, I knew that I belonged in that category, and I knew that the things could definitely progress in a positive way from here. I went away for work to the East Coast for a little bit, and when I was over there, I mean, everything's sore after an ultra marathon. Your eyelashes to your toes are pretty much needing ice at that point. But I had some abnormal pain that I was experiencing. I got on the phone with my wife, and of course she already had every appointment booked for me. But by the time I landed, I got home, and I guess to cut a lot of the out between the conversations with the doctors, but about 2 weeks later, I was diagnosed with cancer.
Wow. Let's just pause there for a sec. Like, a lot of people, when they hear those words, you have cancer. For you to hear that as a young man, a young father, you've got a family that's just starting out, and tell me how it felt when you heard that diagnosis.
Yeah, it's a powerful word. It's a word that's, the disease touched everybody. Every single person you talk to, anyone from a stranger to a family member to your best friend, it's a disease that's touched somebody in some personal way. It's really tough when you hear it, when you feel like you're at the top of your fitness level, and you feel, I felt fit, I felt healthy, really in control of kind of what I was doing, my training. It's the farthest thing from where my head was at that time, to someone saying, hey, you're sick. But for me at the time, I'm sitting there saying, I'm not sick. I feel good. I have some abnormal pain, but I feel good. So it was really difficult. Part of the difficulty too was that the doctors couldn't make that decision on what it was, and that sounds really strange, but at the time they were doing ultrasounds and different tests, and I basically had a split room of doctors where half of them said, hey, look, this looks like it could be cancer, and the other half said, no, absolutely not. So we actually got to the point where the only way we could tell was to do surgery, fairly invasive surgery to actually remove not only the mass, but an area around it, and to put it under a microscope and find out what was happening. The pain was increasing, Of course, I didn't want to go through with the surgery for the sake, when it could be, everything could be fine. So, but just due to the pain and kind of where we were at, went through with the surgery, still not knowing what was the problem. And then, of course, they not only told me I had cancer, but I had the cancer was metastasizing quite quickly, and it was quite aggressive form of cancer. So that kind of sparked a lot more tests. They thought at first the cancer was all taken within the surgery, and then of course my blood levels spiked quite high for tumor markers, and then they realized that it had metastasized to my lymph nodes and my lungs at that point. So the next stop for that type of cancer is the brain. I had an emergency CT scan for my brain. Luckily, it had not gotten to that point yet. So the options were a really radical surgery where they basically cut your entire chest open vertically, take out the entire chain of lymph nodes, and then basically put you back together. Which, in all honesty, versus the cancer treatments at that time was a very viable option. The problem at that point was because my blood levels had spiked so much, they said if they did this surgery, there's nothing saying 2 weeks, 2 months, a year later that it would have already spread to my brain. So at that point, we met with our oncologist on a Thursday, August long weekend, and we were told we were starting chemo Monday. Yeah.
Now, correct me if I'm wrong, but did this start as testicular cancer?
Absolutely. Yeah. So it was testicular cancer. And I mean, it's funny because my first thoughts of testicular cancer prior to any of this is, your initial thoughts are, it's not as serious. It would be fairly isolated. I had no idea. I read Lance Armstrong's book, and it ended up being the same type of testicular cancer Lance Armstrong had. And so, my views, my superficial views on this were nothing close to what it actually was. I had no idea that at this point, my chest, my lungs, and potentially my brain would be affected. It came as a massive, massive shock.
So you spent some time at the Tom Baker, and I mean, Global News did a piece on you, which I just think you took this experience, and a lot of people could take that as, this is awful, like it's devastating. You could hang up the towel and you could just say, you know what, I'm gonna go through my treatment. But you kind of flipped it a different way, and you said, I want to inspire people, and I want to bring my bike into the building. So tell me about that, and what your mission was, and why you decided this was so important to do while you were going through, chemotherapy.
Yeah. So, day one, I didn't want to be too intrusive. So I have to admit, I read Lance Armstrong's book, and, I remember he was cycling through his chemotherapy, and I sat back and thought, all right, that's, maybe this is an option. Day one of chemo, you walk into the Tom Baker. I've never been to the Tom Baker before. You meet nurses. And I've told a lot of people this, but it's like your first day of school. You're in a brand new building. You have essentially teachers who are the nurses. They bring you to a classroom, and you sit there, and you're with a lot of people, a lot of strangers you don't know, but you all have some commonality between yourselves. And you sit there. So for me personally, my protocol, I would do 3 8-hour days consecutive with the IVs in. And then I go home, do 5 days of treatments at home. And then basically that would repeat every 21 days. So I sat there for the first 8 hours on day one, and I thought, this, there has to be, for me personally, I can't sit still. I'm an active person, but I thought, if I have to sit here for 8 hours, I can't go for walks, I can't do anything. I thought there has to be a way I can do this. I spoke to some friends, and they said, listen, if this is these are your treatments, make sure you do them your way. And so I sat back and said, all right, what would make me feel comfortable here. And I knew I couldn't wheel a treadmill in there. But in the same breath, I thought, you know what, I'm bringing my bike in here, and I'm going to make sure that I'm on that bike whenever I can, however I can. And to me, it was kind of my safety blanket in there. It was something I knew. It was a part of me that I that it's a passion to me. It's something I absolutely loved. And so I sat there and I thought, you know what? It was funny. I had already printed out all the literature from Australia and the US on how physical activity helps through chemotherapy, and not only physical activity, like vigorous physical activity. So I had it all printed out. So when I first talked to the doctors, they said no. When I talked to the nurse said, I showed her the stuff right away. And I'm so fortunate to have had, the right nurse at the right time. And she said, you know what, you bring your bike in and I'll deal with my bosses. And to this day, I can't, I felt like everything just happens for a reason. I brought my bike in, I brought my trainer in on day 2. And she said, the only stipulation I have is that your curtain stays open, because I want other people to see that, you can do this while you're receiving treatments. So I said, sure, let's do this. And it was really neat. I think it was the second day or the third day, but I had a lady come in and say, like, hey, I bike to and from chemo. I've never thought about biking here. She started asking. Another lady said, I'm a runner. I'm going to ask them to move my port that they give you for chemo in your chest. I'm going to ask them to move it so I can get my sports bra on, so I can make sure I can be running. And it was really neat, because you started meeting all these people with common interests, or even people. On my last day, I met a gentleman. He must have been in his 60s, but he came over and he was showing me the picture of the new bike he bought, and I was just like, this is just amazing. And of course, I sit back, and physical activity is, I talk about it in one of my videos. Physical activity is my passion. Something, and I don't expect everyone to have that same passion, but I certainly can tell you that when you experience that adversity and you get hit, not necessarily with cancer, but with anything in your life, and you can hold on to those pieces of yourself and stay true to yourself through that adversity, you are going to be yourself on the back end of that, right? And that's the truth in not letting adversity define you. You sitting back, and that was a big thing for me. I said, if cancer is not going to define me. I'm not the person that I'm not going to be. I'm Sanjay, and I have cancer. I'm defining my own journey through this. I know there's a chance that things may not work out well at the back end of this, but I certainly am going to make sure that I'm doing it my way through it, and I'm going to define my journey through this without a doubt.
That is incredible. And I mean, one thing that, cancer does not discriminate. So tell me how that kind of shifted your perspective, I guess, or respected cancer itself. Like, how did that kind of change your mindset? I mean, again, we go back to, you're a young guy, you've got your whole life ahead of you. Like, how did you feel about that?
Yeah, and there's no soft way to say it. You sit back and you look at your family and you look at yourself, and it's hard. You have to reflect on everything at that point, right? You hear the words, and you have to take that time, without a doubt. None of us are robots. You have to sit back and acknowledge what's happening, what could happen, and you need that time. I took that time. It's an emotional for everybody, right? And you sit there and you say, the words are to me. But that ripples to so many people, all of your loved ones, your family, everybody, right? So, you sit back. For me personally, I sat back and I took the time to digest it. But in the same breath, you have to sit back and say, all right, now, I have this. What am I going to do? And you sit there, and it's funny. I read a quote a while back. You don't count the days, make the days count, and you that's all you can do. So I looked at what I had, and I looked at what my abilities were within it, and there's a lot of unknowns. But in the same breath, it's you have to sit back, own it, and really it's going to be what you want to do with it. And for that, I couldn't sit back. I had to I had to go at it full charge. And I'd make jokes to my friends saying, at the very least, at the end of this, cancer is going to make sure it had a stage 4 version of Sanjay, and that's it. And that was my mentality going into it, and that's, for anyone listening as well, going through any adversity. I mean, that's what I'd encourage you to do every day. Make sure that whatever you're going through realizes that you are on top of it.
Love that. Cancer had a stage 4 case of Sanjay. I love that. That is, like, what a way to kick cancer right in the face, right? Like, it's once you kind of put it in that perspective. I'm really curious, like, how long was the treatment? I mean, and I really want to know, there must have been some days where you're like, I don't want to get on my bike today, or I'm just assuming, like, you mentioned the people coming around, like, tell me how much they inspired you to get on that bike and stay consistent for them too. Like, I'm really curious about that side of it.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I, without a doubt, the days are like chemotherapy. You Google it, you look anything online or talk to people, and there's not a whole lot of positives that you're gonna read or hear about. And that's the reality. It doesn't differentiate between good and bad cells, and it kills everything to the point that the cancer goes, but a lot of other things go. So yeah, for good and bad days, it really depended on the day. I went through 84 days of treatment. My goal was to stay active for every day of the treatment. I had no idea what to expect. I had no idea. A lot of people ask me, what can we do? What are you going to need? We're here to help. And honestly, at that point, I truly had no idea what to even tell people. I didn't know what was going to help from day 1 to day 50 to day 84. So I had this idea in my head that we're staying active every day. Every single day, I am staying active and holding myself accountable to it. So I just told everyone who wanted to help to stay active with me every day. At first I thought it was a way of, I thought, hey, it would be cool if 1 or 2 people. I had coworkers that had never put on their running shoes in literally, and I can honestly say, like, decades. They were sending me videos of them running a kilometer. And, you'd sit there on the bad days and you'd be laying in bed and you're like, I don't have it today. I can't, I can't. And you pick up your phone and you'd see, one of the guys sending you a video and saying, hey, I ran my kilometer. It sucked, but I ran it for you. And you're going to go. And so, I was laying in bed and I'd say, all right, this is going to suck too. But the reason they're doing it for me is the reason I'm going to go do it for them. You wake up and you see your family every morning. It's a pretty easy reason to get out of bed and do it. So for me, that was kind of the push behind it. I have days where I'd make it 200 meters up the road and do a terrible walk home. I would have to. There was some very bad days. Lots of sickness. People on the trails probably thought I was the most hungover runner out there. But in the same breath, I knew I didn't have to answer questions to anybody at that point, and I knew what I was doing. I knew why I was doing it, and I that community that got built around that was something I never expected. I was so grateful for, and it was incredible.
Like, talk about that support network a little bit too. Like, it goes from, just your small little family to your extended family, and now complete strangers who are following along on that journey. So, like, I guess, how did you document, or did you document it over the 84 days? Like, how are people getting them, knowing who Sanjay was while you were going through treatment?
Yeah, initially I made one of my friends, very close friend, Graham Sherman. He said, listen, let's make videos. Let's document some of this, and you'll have them. And he said, he kept saying, let's just document it so one day your kids know what a badass person you are. And I said, you know what, buddy, we'll bring the stuff over. I have nothing but time at this point, so let's do it. He's very passionate about his video skills, and he's amazing at it. And so we made 2 YouTube videos, kind of one at the kind of beginning of the journey and one near the end, just to document where things were at. And initially they were just made for my family. They were just made for my kids to be able to see. He kind of came up to me and said, listen, I think these could be something more, and I think we should put these up to on YouTube. I think they could help some people. I reluctantly, I mean, I don't even have Facebook, so I'm not very tech savvy. But I said, listen, if it means that you can do it, and I don't have to try and fiddle my way around a computer and do it, then yes, I'm okay with it. I was not expecting the response to be as overwhelming as it was. Again, I'm so fortunate for it. I'm so grateful for that we decided to go down that road. From the people I've met, that I've heard have helped. The videos have helped them. From it's opened so many doors of me meeting people and being able to talk to people, and the amount that they, complete strangers I've never met, they were able to help me through my journey through cancer and in remission. And in turn, that it was even, the goal was, if it could help one person, that's amazing. I just so humbled by the response from those videos.
I mean, I just had a peek while you were talking about it too. I mean, almost 8,000 views just on one of the videos. Like, it is touching people. It is, I mean, you're doing, to be honest, I'm a little bit sad there were only 2 videos, because they were so well put together, and it spoke volumes about who you are as a person. I don't want to say who you were, because you can tell that you still have that mindset, and you still have that drive, and you still have that passion to inspire others. So, I acknowledge you for that. That's awesome to see. That is so incredible. Like, I'm really curious. Tell me how this whole experience, like, what does grief mean to you? What does that word mean to you?
Grief. Oh. That's a tough question. That's hard to answer.
Let me flip it this way. So, I mean, the cancer diagnosis is tough, but right now we are in a worldwide pandemic where a lot of people are dealing with maybe not, the cancer diagnosis, but there are periods where people are dealing with, they're grieving the life that they once knew. They're grieving the way that they felt, the way that they thought their life was going to be. So, I mean, and maybe talk about how, something that could, block the road or cause adversity or something like that. Like, tell me how that, I guess, the best way to progress through that.
Yeah, you know what? I mean, I kind of what I mentioned before, like adversity comes to us in a pile of different ways through our life. And some people will deal with a lot more adversity, some will deal with less. And it's hard to even measure that on a scale, because something that could, really affect me, it may not someone else. But I mean, that's so individual too, right? And the reality is that we're all going to experience adversity in our life. You sit back and you have that grieving time. And like I said, I took the, you have to sit back and say, okay, this is what's happening. This is what's in front of me, and this is how it's affecting me. And of course, this is kind of how I deal with things. But in the same breath, you have to say, okay, is this gonna define me? Everything I've done to this point, everything that I've done to define who I am as a person, am I going to let this adversity define me as who I am now? And you know what? Sometimes you have to. Sometimes you have to in little bits. But ultimately, you have to sit back and say, am I going to define? Is this adversity going to define me, or am I going to define myself through this adversity? If you have that, I've talked to people, and people have said, comments I've gotten are, a lot about strength. You were strong prior going into this. You were fit going into this. You have a strong, you have this multi-sport background, and you've already developed this strength. And it's funny because strength, like lifting weights, running fast, that's not strength. Strength comes from this developing this will inside you that you truly believe will not be beat. If you can develop, like once you develop that will, you can sit back at that point and no matter what adversity you're going to get hit with, sure, you're going to have to sit back and reflect on it. But in the same breath, the adversity, you're going to look at it. You're going to take pieces of yourself and you're going to make sure that you are that same person on the back end of it. However it is, however you have to change things. And that was my mentality going into it every time. And it opens so many different doors too, because you go there and you say, okay, how do we bring this out in people, right? How do you spark that inner will, that inner, I cannot be defeated attitude. And a lot of it comes from, like, what are we doing around ourselves? What are the doctors doing around us? What are we doing as trainers, as educators to truly empower the people around us, right? I got prescription pads saying these are the 5 pills you'll take for anti-nausea, or whatever the drugs you need to take during chemo. But in the same breath, what if that prescription pad said, here are the 2 walks you have to do every day? Here are the, because you sit back and go, I don't have the strength, I don't have the energy to do it. But in the same breath, if you had that person behind you saying, no, I'm going to hold you accountable. And not only that, I'm going to tell you can do it. You absolutely can do it. And we empower those people around us to do it. That inner strength is just going to sit there and just start growing and growing and growing. And that, it's not about, oh, you had the strength before. It's what are we going to do right now to build that strength in people to say, hey, listen, this is going to be me. I am hit with this adversity, but I sure as hell am going to make sure that I'm that same person on the back end of this, however I need to be, if not stronger.
So treatment is done. You got to tell me what the feeling was like to ring that bell.
Oh, yeah, emotional. Yeah, very emotional. I still have a very hard time watching that last video. Yeah, very hard time. It's hard to believe because when you're doing it, you barely have the energy to even ring it. It's kind of the last of the treatments. Everything's built up to that point. The cool thing, though, is that while you're from day one until the last day of treatment, you hear the bell almost daily. And it's a really cool feeling in there. Everyone's clapping, cheering. Even the people that are just, you can tell when people are just wiped from the drugs and laying in their chairs, you can see them spark up when that bell goes. It's a really unique feeling, and it's kind of like when you see all the grad classes ahead of you, and you're like, oh, it'll never be my time, and then all of a sudden you're there. It was, to have my wife there, it was just incredible.
That what a special moment, and what a special moment to capture too, because this is like you said, it's hard to watch, but maybe down the road, 10 years from now, you could always look back and say, damn, cancer had a stage 4 case of Sanjay, right?
Yeah, absolutely. It's it was a super proud moment. And you almost wish that every person throughout that time could be like, they deserve to ring it just as much as you do.
So where are you now? I mean, is the cancer gone? Are you in remission? Like, how are you feeling now?
Yeah, you know what? So this December, I will be 2 years in remission, which is fantastic. And yeah, over the moon. I'm still doing tests every 3 months, chest X-rays, CTs, blood work, which won't stop for the 5 years to be considered cancer-free. But yeah, huge. Every 3 months is another step in the right direction. When I found out I was in remission, I think it would have been just after that. I got a phone call saying that because the 50K Worlds weren't held in the year I qualified for them, that they were going to be held, and I was holding a spot for Team Canada. So they said, hey, do you want to, are you ready to go? Are you ready to run? Not knowing much of my background or what I'd gone through for the last year. And in my I guess stupidity at the time, of course, I covered up the phone, looked at my wife and said, "Yep, I'm ready to go. Let's do this." And I remember she was like, "You are not ready to go." but yeah, you know, so in my 7 months of remission, I luckily was able to head over to Europe to have one, which I promised was going to be my last race. It was a lot more than a race to me. It was a giant kind of FU to cancer. All the people that supported me up to that point, it was for everybody else except for myself. It's something I felt like I had to do, and it was one of the proudest moments for sure.
Tell me that feeling of crossing the finish line.
Oh, I was wrecked. Body wasn't ready. But you know what? So I say that twofold. Body wasn't ready, but in the same breath, I had an amazing coaching team that got behind me and did everything they could to put me into the right place. I ended up at the start line with a bunch of guys that I watched their YouTube videos of, you know, pro runners, and I was like, oh my gosh, I'm not even sure if I should be towing the line with any of these guys. But then in the same breath, I said, you know what? None of these guys have been through what I've been through. None of them have a hurt locker as deep as mine, and at the very least, they're gonna see. I can go into, like, after this last year, I can go to a place that I know they can't, and so that was my mentality going in. I tried my very best to hang on to the top pack for a while, settled into kind of a chase pack, and I ended up about 8 kilometers left. The legs just didn't want to go anymore. In the same breath, I knew if I had to crawl across the line, if it was going to be midnight, that's the way it's going down. But in no way would I do anyone that disservice or disrespect. So I gathered my thoughts. I knew I was going to, in all honesty, I knew at some point in that race I was going to be kind of be in the shit. And luckily I sat back and said, all right, you've had the best preparation for this. So let's get after it. And it was incredible. I was able to, someone handed me the Canadian flag when I finished. It was incredible. And it was 8 minutes faster than my national time. So I was, yeah, pretty happy.
What a cool way to kind of finish that off. That is incredible. That is, like, I just got chills when you said you were handed that Canada flag. Like, to have that and just the people behind you, like, incredible. That's awesome. What's your training like now? I mean, today we're recording mid-November, but I'm really curious. I mean, you're probably training at home right now, but I mean, are you training for anything specific at the moment?
I am training to live till I'm 90 right now. That is the goal. You know what? I was, like I said, I've been so fortunate to have great opportunities through the racing world. Great coaches like Cal and Malk, Kent, and just met some great people through the racing world. That all being said, you know, cancer and any kind of big change in your life forces a lot of perspective change. In saying that, you know, I have a 2 and a 4-year-old now, a wife that has put up with early morning race starts to standing at the line with screaming kids, and you know, I can't be thankful enough for the support I've had at home. That being said, I also know that I need to take that step back from racing. And it was the best decision I made, to be honest. I'm spending so much more time with my kids. I'm running and biking lots, but on my own time. You know, it's funny. I was told something from one of my old coworkers that you have to see what you're looking at. And I said to my wife, I'm like, man, these trails I always run. I was like, it's amazing. There's these amazing bridges. There's all this stuff. But you know, when it's not about pace and staring at a watch all the time, it's really neat to just to run on my own terms and bike on my own terms. And and it's been incredible. So I'm still running, still biking lots, spending some time in the gym, but making sure I'm spending a lot of time at home.
Well, Sanjay, like I am surprised with how long this conversation has gone. It feels like we just scratched the surface. I could talk to you all day long. So I have to have you back on a part two, but I do want to be respectful of your time. I've got one final question here while I still have you. I guess, how would you have defined, I mean, if we spoke before the diagnosis, before 2017, how would have you defined fitness and how do you define it now?
Oh, wow. Um, I, that's a great question. How would I define fitness? You know, I think I'd always define it as necessary, always, and that's just, you know, and you strip that down. You know, you don't need at any level. I think it's always necessary, just for good health, for mental stability, for meeting amazing people. So you know what? Before I would say it was necessary, and now even more so. I would definitely say it's necessary. That definition hasn't changed, as long as you keep that within the, you know, the broad range of every ability level and demographic, for sure.
Well, Sanjay, I want to acknowledge you here before I let you go. I want to acknowledge you for allowing yourself to be human. When something knocks at your door, you will process that and you allow yourself to be vulnerable, but you don't let it bring you down, and you don't let it get to a point where it's devastating for you. And I acknowledge you for that. I acknowledge you for a dedication to a goal. The fact that you committed to 84 days of trying to keeping that body moving, even though you had the cancer diagnosis, and it was quite aggressive. You were going through some chemotherapy that, you know, your family had to support you through. So I acknowledge you for that. And digging into that hurt locker. I mean, there's nobody in the world that can experience what you went through. While they may have similar stories, they're not exactly the same as Sanjay. So I just want to acknowledge you for taking all of that and still inspiring others. Because a lot of people could say, no, I'm shutting everything down. I need this time for me. I need to find time to focus. But you took that as an opportunity to help others. So I acknowledge you for that. Thank you so much. I mean, what a beautiful story. And I thank you for sharing it on the Calgary Fitness Podcast.
And honestly, I really, thank you so much for taking the time to share my story. One quick thing while you are talking about helping others, you know, obviously this is a podcast, so you can't see, but the hat I'm wearing today, this is in support of the gentleman I spoke about, Jacob Pusey. His brother right now, who is a international icon, top marathon runner in the world, is going through a terrible cancer battle himself. So he's dealing with his stuff in the U.S. right now, but Craft Sports has definitely put all the donations for all the hats and shirts, the Run with Rivs hats and shirts. So I'm wearing that today. I just got it in the mail today, actually, in support of him. So I always want to not only give him a shout out, but you know, there's another guy who's going through a hell of a battle, and he's his words of inspiration through it are incredible. So.
Wow. And if you can, like, send me that and I'll put it in the show notes if people do want to get more details about that, and maybe they can support the cause as well. I think that'd be awesome. Is there any place where people can find out more about you, what you're up to, whether it's the social media, whether it's, you know, the YouTube videos, websites, anything like that you want to throw out?
Yeah, absolutely. So my YouTube channel, which I'll definitely give you the link of. I'm not sure if there's I guess some quicker way to get to it. I will learn this stuff, I promise. My Instagram is sj.sachdev, and you know, as we kind of continue this journey and getting into this a little bit more, I'm definitely going to be pushing a lot more with the new cancer center to hopefully get some fitness equipment in there. You know, it's going to be an interesting interesting conversations, but that is definitely a goal with the new cancer center. And just continue. This is kind of step one of hopefully doing some more podcasts and some public speaking to really help some people out, not only going through cancer, but just the adversities in their life and how to look at them, tackle them, and
Love it. Sanjay, thank you so much for your time today. Hang on the line for a sec. I'm going to stop the recording, but I just want to wrap up with you.
Yeah, absolutely.